So welcome to our latest Digital Good webinar. This time we're talking about everything accessibility. So a little bit about Studio Republic to start with. So we're a creative digital agency. We work predominantly with charities. We also work with not-for-profits and purpose-driven businesses. We've been doing this since 2003. And our mission statement is that we exist to be a catalyst for positive change, social justice and environmental protection. And we work on a variety of projects from obviously websites, but also branding, campaigns, brand evolution, you name it, anything that's creative and digital, that is our bag. So about the webinar today, making accessible design your priority. So we've got an agenda, which is what is accessible design? What is inclusive design? Why should they be a priority? The core principles of each, some basic practices to follow, how you can incorporate them into your products and processes, and a wrap up. I'll be doing a Q&A at the end. While we're going through, if you have any questions at all, pop them in the chat in Zoom, and I will do my best to answer them at the end. Okay, so let's carry on. So our accessibility journey. So obviously we've been building websites for nigh on 20 years now. But our journey into becoming a more accessible agency started when we saw Chrissy Barrick talk at a BEMA conference a few years ago. And it was all around people's issues with using digital. So people that have a permanent disability or a permanent difficulty using digital products, but also the idea of a temporary issue. So it could be something like a broken arm or just having eye drops put in, making websites harder to use, or a situational disability or situational impairment. So that could be someone that is holding a baby or someone that is using a website on the train and can't listen to the video. So it really opened our eyes to the issues around tech and really made us want to try and be better. So following up on that, we got involved with Scope and their Big Hack initiative, which was basically inviting a load of agencies to learn more about the issues and come up with ways that we might be able to do our bit to help solve them. So a few guys from the team went up, spent the day with Scope and came back really, really pumped. And that led to us producing this document, the Principles of Inclusive Design, which we'll be sharing with everyone as a PDF after the webinar. And this is basically a guide, a checklist for how a website can be made more accessible and more inclusive. It's intended predominantly for agencies. It's really our industry that needs to step up and make this more part of the general process of design, but it can be used for clients and agencies alike, and hopefully you'll find it useful. So what is accessible design? For this, I've given an example of something in the real world because it's just easier to give context to. So this is something I would class as being completely accessible. So it's a cafe, the entrance is completely flat, everyone can access it in exactly the same way. It has a nice wide door for wheelchair access, simple, easy to use counter, which isn't too high. It's really inclusive, it's really accessible. Some examples of things that aren't quite so accessible is people making efforts to try and improve what they already have. Obviously on the left, you have something which hopefully we never see in the real world, someone trying to give a wheelchair ramp without obviously thinking about their users at all. But also you have the example of a temporary wheelchair ramp, so something that's been put in with best intentions to make that shop more accessible, but ultimately it's something that needs to be requested, added individually, and isn't actually particularly inclusive, because although it does give someone in a wheelchair access to that premises, it means that person has to go and request it. It's not something that is there by default. And that's the kind of difference between a truly accessible website and something that has accessibility patched onto it. It's not something that is truly an intrinsic part of the experience and something that, you know, we would strive to evolve the site into something that is just off the bat accessible to everybody. So if we have a look at the benefits of this, the benefits are that everyone has the same experience. No matter what your challenges are, no matter what device you're using, everyone can access the same information. Everyone can use the website and convert on the website without any barriers at all. So inclusive design. So we've touched on that a little bit with the wheelchair access being completely flat for that one cafe. But sometimes you do need to get from one level to another. And I found this great example, which shows that, you know, you need to get from a lower level to an upper level. Now you could have a separate wheelchair ramp and separate steps, but in this case, they've decided to design them all into one inclusive device for getting from one level to another. Everyone gets up, everyone uses the exact same method to get there, but built into that is the ability for someone in a wheelchair and someone who is walking up the steps to access it in exactly the same way. The benefits for this are pretty obvious, that, you know, by having everyone access the same thing at the same time, slightly different methods, but truly inclusive in that everyone is using the same device to get from one level to another. So how are they different? So accessibility is a process, and it's something that always has to evolve. Different technologies change, the content on the website changes, and it's something that needs to be constantly thought about, constantly reviewed. Inclusivity is a bit different because it's not just the technical aspect of how a website can work for different users. It's also looking at the language on the website, the visuals on a website, making sure that anyone from any background feels included, that feels that they are part of the website, part of the process, and that builds empathy with your users. It also builds equity, so they're more likely to buy into the message that you're portraying of the website, and they're also more likely to convert on your website. So why should they be a priority? Well, it's obvious. The more people that can interact with your website, the more purposeful your website will be. In a nutshell, if you have a conversion journey, say you have a donation page on your website, you want as many people to be able to convert on that as humanly possible. So making it a truly accessible and inclusive experience for all means you will be maximizing on those conversions from every user, just not just the ones that have perfect vision, can use a mouse and keyboard, have a high level of understanding of the English language. It means that anyone can convert equally on your site. So part of what came out of the scope conversation, and something that they are very, very public and vocal about, is the actual stats. So what does this mean in terms of the current landscape of web users? So in the UK, there are 16 million people with a disability. It's 1 in 4 of us have some sort of disability. Around 1.5 million people have a learning disability. 1 in 10 have dyslexia. 2 million people are living with sight loss. 12 million people have a hearing loss greater than 25 dB, so a significant hearing impairment. And around 151,000 people use British Sign Language. This is a large part of the population that we're talking about here. In terms of the digital landscape, a survey which is carried out annually of 1 million homepages found that 97.4% of those have real serious accessibility errors on them. So not just a little glitch, but something that would cause someone to have difficulty using that site. In the UK, the online spending power of UK disabled users is around about 24.8 billion a year. 7 out of 10 disabled people abandon difficult to use websites. It's quite a startling stat. And that accounts to an estimated £17.1 billion of online lost revenue in 2019. it's a big scary stat, especially if you're relying on online donations as a big part of your fundraising efforts. Of those people, 4 million people have said that they've abandoned a retail website because of those barriers that they face, and 86% have chosen to pay for a more expensive product from an accessible website rather than buy the same product from a website that was harder to use. So it's a real issue, and there's a lot that can be done. In terms of legal and ethical responsibilities, sadly, we're a bit behind the States on this. So in the States, it is illegal to have an inaccessible website. We're catching up. So there was the Equality Act in 2010, which was an update to the Disability Discrimination Act in 1995. Public sector 2018 accessibility regulation says that any public sector website is required to be accessible. That doesn't just stop at .gov websites though. Any charity that predominantly runs based on government money is also required to conform to these accessibility regulations. And ethically, it's just the right thing to do. You know, an analogy would be, if you were building a cinema, you would put a hearing loop in. You wouldn't discriminate against deaf people by not letting them access the film. Or if you were building a new shop, hopefully you would make sure that it was wheelchair friendly. You wouldn't necessarily go out and build a new shop with steps. And the website should be exactly the same as that. We shouldn't be putting in any barriers. So in terms of these 2018 accessibility regulations, so charities and non-government organizations that do need to meet these regulations include those that are mostly financed by public funding, but also provide services that are essential to the public and provide services directed at disabled people. So any charity that ticks one or more of those boxes absolutely have to abide by these accessibility regulations. So the impact of neglect. So what actually happens when someone is trying to access a website that isn't accessible? So we have here, actually we have a bit later on an idea of exactly what that is, and in real life we will come to that. Excuse me, that slide is in the wrong order. So benefits of prioritizing it. The benefits of prioritizing accessibility are that, you know, you are maximizing on your reach, you're maximizing on your impact, you're maximizing on your conversions, your donations, and you are basically walking the walk as well as talking the talk. You're a charity, you're out there providing a service. You should absolutely be inclusive to absolutely every user. So let's go into some core principles. Core principles of inclusive design. So accessibility is an outcome, inclusive design is a process. So design in any form is about empathy. And without empathy, designers are only creating products and services for themselves, rather than those who'll be using the end product. And inclusive and accessible design means broadening that empathy. Inclusive design means creating websites that are welcoming and comfortable for everyone, no matter what their sexual orientation, gender, race, age, impairment, and more. That's what inclusive design is all about. In terms of diversity, are you being representative with your choice of imagery? And be really careful of unconscious bias when you're choosing, especially stock images. Are you showing a mix of skin tones, genders, ages, and abilities in your photography? Is there a gender bias in your iconography? And you can see this a lot if you search for something like profile icon in Google Images. You will see it's predominantly male. Similarly, if you have the icon of a hand, skin tone generally is either yellow and you get the Simpsons looking hand, or it tends to default towards pink. So making sure that you are properly representing a range of skin tones is really important. And then inclusivity. So try and remove bias and assumptions from the website and ensure that no users feel excluded from it. All of your content should be easily understandable. So you should be considering learning difficulties when you're writing content on there. And you should also consider low bandwidth. You know, do you need to have so many images and videos to get your core message across? And then equity. So equity in web design refers to equitable outcomes. So in other words, regardless of who the visitor is, every visitor should be able to complete tasks with ease. So the core principles of accessible design is perceivable. So can users perceive the concept? So just because something is perceivable with one sense, such as sight, that doesn't mean that all users can perceive it. So are you providing tools for users that can't see the site to be able to still understand what it is that you're talking about? So operable. So are all of your UI components navigable? So for example, if a component requires a hover state to trigger functionality that would not be possible to someone using a touch device or someone who can't use a mouse, that's a big issue. So hover state should only be there to add a little bit of pizzazz to a website. It shouldn't be triggering events that someone that can't hover can't access. Understandable. So can all your users understand the content? Is the interface throughout the website consistent enough so there's no confusion being added? And robust. Can content be consumed by all required browsers, and does it work with assistive technology? It's a really, really important one. So best practices. Empathize with your users. So get to know your users, understand who it is that you're using your website. From those users, ask lots of questions. So don't be afraid to go out to your user base and ask for feedback, ask for their comments. Doesn't always necessarily mean that they'll provide entirely positive comments, but actually that anything that is a criticism is a way of improving. So it's really, really important that you really understand who it is that's using your website and you get their feedback. Seeking out points of inclusion. So trying to find any potential barriers in the website, anything on there that could make someone feel uncomfortable because they're not being properly catered for on the website. Identifying situational challenges. So if you have a video on your website and it doesn't have closed captions, someone who is deaf or someone who's on the train and can't listen to that video won't be able to understand that. So any videos on there, make sure you've obviously got captioning on there, but ideally have a transcript of that around there. Recognizing personal biases. So we all have these unconscious biases. So it's a hard thing to overcome, but try as much as possible to put your own personal biases aside and think always from the user's point of view. And identifying assumptions. So try obviously not to make assumptions about your users, but where that has unconsciously or consciously happened, try and identify those and try and rectify them. And then continuous learning. So always keeping up to date with what's going on in the wider world in terms of assistive technology, that kind of thing, but also, you know, making sure that you are truly aware of the issues that your users might face, you know, be that disability led or be that something to do more culturally. Always striving to understand those users that you have is really, really important. So a lot of this is covered by WCAG, so Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and this is what we test against. This is what we can test in an automated fashion to make sure that the tools for a website are there and are available to everyone. It's great for doing that automated test. It will highlight any glaring errors of the website, but it doesn't really go that deep into how the website is actually used by someone, for example, using a screen reader. So it's really important to go above and beyond this, but this is a really, really good start. So in terms of these tenets, so is the website perceivable? So always making sure that you have text alternatives. That's for images, alt tags, but also anything that is that has functionality around it. So for example, form buttons should have descriptive values. embedded multimedia, so things like videos, YouTube videos, Vimeo, whatever, should be identified by accessible text. Iframes should always contain an appropriate title attribute, and we see this a lot. YouTube uses iframes, also a lot of donation platforms where you pull in a form from externally will have an iframe. It's really important that that has a title on it, because that then tells the screen reader what it is that that user's interacting with. Any audio should be accompanied by a transcript and have a mechanism for muting or changing the volume. And any video content especially should contain those synchronized captions. Then we come into time-based media. So anything where a page could potentially time out, it should be warned. So it should be that someone can either resume their progress with that, or that it's very clear that, you know, you only have 10 minutes to fill this form in. Adaptable. So will the website work equally well on a mobile or a desktop or a tablet, but also will it work equally well on low or high bandwidth? Distinguishable. So can users understand the difference between a bit of text and a background color? So color alone shouldn't be used to distinguish a link from surrounding text. Text and background colors and images should have a contrast ratio of at least 4.5 to 1. Again, that's something you can do an automated test on. Super important. You should be able to read content on the desktop site when it's zoomed by 200%. You should be able to read content on a mobile site when it's zoomed by 400%. So how well does your site adapt when someone is using the zoom tools in their browser? You should never have horizontal scrolling when text is zoomed. Blocks of text should be no more than 80 characters long. Text should never be fully justified. And text and line height should be at least 1.5 times the font size, just to make it much easier to read. Squished up text, obviously, is harder to read. And then operable. So make sure all functionality can be accessed from a keyboard. Any page specified keyboard shortcuts should be avoided where possible, as they can clash with screen readers. So don't have nice functionality where you can press Alt S to get to something. That can interfere with those screen readers. And keyboard focus should never be trapped in one element. It's sometimes that you go into a login form and you're locked straight into the username field. That's really hard to get out of for screen readers. So let people choose what they're focusing on. So time sensitive material. So giving users enough time to read and use the content. Anything that automatically moves, so say carousels that will go on to the next slide after 5 seconds or so, there should be a way for users to pause them so that they have time to read the content. If an authentication session expires, the data on that page should be stored so the user should come back to it, and users should be warned about any timeout that could result in loss of that data. Physical reactions. So don't design content that's known to cause seizures and physical reactions. So loads of flashing images on the website may look great to you, but actually can have a real serious impact on someone. So the rule for that is there should be no more than 3 flashes on a page per second, and users should be able to disable automatic and user triggered animations. And this can actually be done within the coding of the website. There are now tools within operating systems to reduce motion. This can actually be read as a setting within the code of the website, so you can actually turn off all animations automatically if someone doesn't want them. So is it navigable? So there should be a skip navigation link on the website, so a screen reader can easily get past that nav, so they don't have to tab through every single element to get to the content on the page. Pages should have a descriptive title and informative titles throughout the page. Have informative page headings. The navigation of order of links and form elements should be logical and intuitive. A lot of time, things like form plugins will try and make their form the first thing you get to when you start tabbing. It's really bad, because then someone has to go through all the way through your form before they get back to the navigation. The purpose of any link should be obvious from its text alone. So read more, find out more, all no-nos. There should be real context into that link about what it is that's going to happen when someone clicks on it or someone uses their keyboard to focus and then go through on it. Any complex site structures should have a breadcrumb component, and any sequences should have a display with each step and how many steps you have left in that process. Input modalities. So making it easier for users to operate functionality through various inputs. So functionality requires multi-point or path gestures such as a swipe, a drag, or a pinch. They should also be available on click. So lots of swipers and sliders on sites. You can just scroll through with your finger. You should always have those arrows on there as well. If a link or a button contains text, then the alt text, the ARIA label, or the label for that must have the same text. And to make it easy for someone to be able to tap on it or click on an element, it should always be at least 44 by 44 pixels. So I mentioned earlier about negative experiences. So we have a video here which shows someone trying to use a website which has had an accessibility plugin added to it. So I'm just going to play a little bit of this video so you can get an idea of the sort of barriers that these widgets, which are there with good intentions to increase the accessibility of a site, can get in the way.
Get an accessible experience. So let's see whether that widget improves the experience for Joe. Just a note, the reason why we're making this a recording and not doing it live is it's taken about an hour for me to be Joe's eyes on how to really use this widget in any meaningful way for him, because there's not an easy way for him to know what the widget does and how it's meant to improve his experience. And obviously Joe's been using his chosen screen readers for a long time, so this is all new technology for him. So in a way, he has to learn a new set of technology even to benefit from the widget. But let's see whether there is any benefit in him using the widget. So Joe, maybe you could activate that widget and look to turn on the keyboard commands.
Okay.
Escape. Home. Leaving menus. Combo box. Select here. Menu. We escape. Sale. Locksmith store. Leaving menus. Locksmith escape.
Just bear with me because
Locksmith.
I've lost keyboard control on this website.
Keyless entry remote.
There we go.
Norton shopping guarantee. Accessibility. Press enter to skip to main content button. Press enter to enable accessibility. Press enter to skip to main content button. Press enter to enable accessibility button to activate. Press enter to skip to main. Press enter to open the user web link accessibility link or Facebook. Link accessibility company homepage. Press enter to open the user way accessibility menu button.
So Joe, maybe you could explain.
Okay, I'm going to stop that there because it's quite uncomfortable. It shows there that the difficulties that particular user who has a screen reader has in actually interacting with that website. What actually happens, we'll share a link to the whole video so you can see it in all its grim glory, is that when he finally gets through to that, all the widget does is makes the text bigger on the website and highlights all the links in yellow. Doesn't add any benefit to that screen reader. And in fact, it actually makes that experience much harder for Joe to actually interact and work with the website. Not very comfortable viewing, but hopefully you get the idea that it's much more important to create an accessible website in the first place rather than trying to patch it with a plugin. So understandable. So make any of your content on the site readable and understandable. So things like adding a language tag to the HTML element, that gives the screen reader an idea of what language it's reading in. Really important. They can figure it out, but it just helps. If a block of content on your site has a different language to the rest of the page's content, then that can have its own language attribute again, so the screen reader understands that, okay, this is French text that I'm reading now on an English page or vice versa. So make web pages appear and operate in predictable ways. So if an element receives focus, so it's tabbed to, it shouldn't result in a substantial change to the page. That shouldn't cause pop-ups to appear. They should always be something that is is decided by the user rather than just because of where they are on the page. When a user inputs information or interacts with the control, it shouldn't result in a substantial change to the page. Again, it shouldn't cause pop-ups to appear, only if they've chosen for that to happen. Navigation links that are repeated throughout the site should never change order. Your nav should always be entirely consistent throughout the site. And elements that have the same function on different pages of the site should always be labeled in exactly the same way, making sure that it's, when you learn it once, it's exactly the same throughout the site. And any substantial changes to a page, like pop-ups appearing or changes of keyboard focus, should always be initiated by the user. So input assistance, so helping users to avoid and correct their mistakes. So if a form element is required, it should be really clear in the label that it is required. Any validation errors on a form should be descriptive and should be right next to the element that you've failed that validation on. Form labels should always be there. They shouldn't be hidden, and they should be directly next to the input that they're associated with. And when a user submits a form, the submission should be really clearly confirmed, either with a message on that page or taken into a thank you page just to confirm that it has gone through correctly. So robust. So making sure that your website is compatible. So not only with what's around now, but trying to be as future-proof as you can by keeping things simple and including the tools to allow assistive technology to work really, really well with your website. As a very, very basic, the HTML must pass W3C validation, sorry. So making sure that the structure of the page is correct, all of the tags are created correctly, closed correctly on the website. That makes screen readers work much, much, much better. Correct HTML5 markup should be used with accessibility in mind. So things like having required fields, required elements on fields, rather than fixing this with JavaScript later, is really, really important. And ARIA should be used appropriately when that HTML5 isn't sufficient. So things like, and this is getting a bit techie now, so ARIA labels, so giving real context to screen readers about what something's about to do. So making sure that your menus are tagged up appropriately, so when a user tabs into it with the screen reader is telling the user that they've entered into a menu rather than just a list of links. And if a status message appears and the focus isn't set to that message, then that message should be announced. Again, that's something that can be done in code. But a screen reader, unless you're actually within that section, won't know to read it out. But there are ways around that to make sure that it does happen. So this really, really does need to be incorporated into everything, into products and into processes. And it's something that we've taken on and we're continually improving on throughout all of our processes, right from the initial scope of a project. When we're creating a brand, the first thing that we're considering is the use of a font that is easy to read, colors that provide enough contrast and will build empathy with the user, imagery, again, that is inclusive, that's accessible, and that provides real meaning to that brand. Then when it comes through to development, you know, our whole process now is accessibility focused. So we always start from the point of making our code accessible, rather than going back to the end of a project and trying to retrofit that code back into a site. It's much, much easier when it's just a part of your process. And it absolutely shouldn't be something that is a bolt-on or something that you're expecting a client to pay more for. It should, as an industry, be something that we all take seriously and we all put into our processes, because we ultimately, as designers and developers, have a responsibility to make sure that what we're producing is accessible to all. Obviously, it doesn't stop with the agency. There's also a big responsibility for content owners and content editors to make sure that when you're adding content, you're structuring your content in a way that is easily perceivable and easily understandable. If you add an image to the website, making sure that the alt text isn't just stuff with keywords, it actually describes what that image is. And also thinking about the choice of image. Do I actually need an image there? Does it add anything for all users, or is it just fluff on the page? It should always be used to build empathy and to give real benefit to all of your users. And ultimately, you know, we all have the power to drive change. So as clients, we can demand more of our agencies. We can insist, if we're looking to start a new project, that accessibility is at the forefront of your agency's mind. And if you have an existing product with an existing agency, you know, it's okay to not be perfect, but we should always be striving to improve. So work with your agency to improve things, both on the content side, but also in the back end code. So actions that we can all take, agency and client side, is accepting responsibility. So knowing what is our responsibility, is it code, is it content, accepting that and making sure that we're doing all that we can to make a truly inclusive product. Training and education, there are loads and loads of resources out there to help. Obviously, we're going to be sharing our guide, but there's a lot more that you can do in terms of truly understanding the difficulties that users face and how you can help to overcome them. It's really important to audit a website regularly and to have it assessed. So as I said, there are lots of automated tools that will do this. The gold standard is to have users with real life physical difficulties actually try and use your website and get their feedback. It's quite startling when you do that. It's also not cheap, because ultimately you're asking people to give up their time and they need to be paid for it. So that kind of testing is the absolute gold standard. It's expensive, but that's the one way to truly understand if all users will be able to access your website equally and in a really inclusive way. Incorporating into workflows and just culture generally. And this isn't just about digital, this is about every aspect of business and everyday life, making sure that we're truly understanding the issues that people may face in life, in digital, in the workplace, and making sure that everything we do has that in the back of our minds, well, in the front of our minds, through the work that we do and through the actual culture that we have as an organization. And collaborating with your users, getting their input, getting their feedback, getting real life experiences of how your website works. And it's not just limited to someone with a disability, someone that a user has a very old PC or an old phone or a limited data plan, are they able to get the same level of experience out there? And collaborating with experts. Scope has launched recently a new business facing website, and they have loads and loads of resources on there. They have loads of training, and they also have some consultancy services that can help when it comes to being a more accessible and inclusive organization. So collaborating with organizations like them, collaborating with your developers to make sure that everyone's taking equal responsibility and everyone's on the same page. Really, really important to identify your assumptions and biases. We all do it. We all assume that we know our users and we know what sort of devices they're going on because Google Analytics told me, and we kind of know where they live, but we don't know what individual difficulties they may face on a day-to-day. So it's really important to identify those assumptions that we've made, the biases that we may have, try and overcome those, and try and think always from the user perspective first. And then implementing best practices. So again, agency and client side, but making sure that we understand what those best practices are from a content and a coding point of view, and making sure that we're always following those, implementing them, and always tweaking, evolving, and making sure that we're always striving to be better with our online experiences. So there are quite a few tools that we can use for this. One which is really great is Google Lighthouse. So this will run in your browser, or there are websites that you can use that will run the Google the like Google Lighthouse test on your site, and that tests for a number of things. It's mostly obviously a tool for SEO, so it will test things like the best practices that are used in terms of your code. It will test the performance of your website, the SEO, but it also will give a really good ready reckoner about the accessibility of it. Have you got all of the tools in place at a high level, but to make sure that your website's accessible? Then moving on from that are automated online accessibility tests. So there are some where you can just do a quick review of your homepage and it will give you an outline report. There are others where you can crawl an entire website. It will then identify absolutely every issue on your website and give you generally a nice long list of things that either are broken and need to be fixed, but also the better tools will give you a really good idea of things that you can improve upon. So not necessarily an error, but a warning. You know, your text contrast could be a bit higher, your text could be a bit bigger. You know, some pages you may have put your heading tags out of order. So things like that are generally quite quick and easy fixes. But all of those, again, every time you make an improvement to your website, you're making it more inclusive for your users. You can run accessibility tests in your browser. So there are some really good ones. Don't worry, we're going to share links to all of these after the webinar. So having that just sitting there as a Chrome extension, for example, means actually on any website, you can just click a button and see any of the issues on that site. It's quite good for checking your competitors out, but it also can give you a really quick ready reckoner of anything that you might need to fix on any page of your website straight away. There's a great Chrome screen reader extension. It's not quite at the level of something like JAWS, which is proprietary software, which is really great, but does cost quite a bit of money to get installed. But the Chrome screen reader extension will give you that idea of what it's like to use your site as a blind user, and that will very quickly highlight any blockers, such as that accessibility plugin that we showed earlier. But anywhere where a user might just get stuck on the page and can't actually get through to the donate form or the contact us form, gives a really, really good idea of what those blockers might be. And then, like I said, the gold standard is user testing. So real people using their standard real devices in the way that they always access the internet, gives you a great idea of what your site's actually like to use for some of those people. So we've got another example from the same people, same guy testing. This time it's a site that's been properly built from the ground up with accessibility in mind. You'll see there's no accessibility widget on here. I'll just play a bit of this. Again, you can watch the full video, but it shows the difference when something is structured properly.
So I'm at the top of the screen again, and so I'm going to start tabbing through. So right immediately there's a skip to search link. So there's a skip to navigation link, quick link to jump down to the search engine if I wanted to utilize that. That's the good thing. Skip to main content single page link. And again, there's another skip to navigation link to get to the main content on the page, which would be, again, very useful to a screen reader user.
And Joe, just to clarify here, just so people know what keys you're using, you're just using the tab key correctly at the moment, or you're using
at the moment now I'm just using the tab keys.
Okay.
Level 1 link graphic visible. Okay, so that's just the main level for the main page. So that's Chewy. Level 1 link graphic visible. Okay. Find the best for your text advertise pop-up. That's search field. Clear button. Here's clear. Submit button. So I can do a search in that search edit field. Submit button. 24/7 helpline. There's a 24/7 customer support link. I assume that would take me to and give me information about resources that would be available if I want to
I had any sort of customer service issues.
Open customer support menu.
There's an open customer support menu that's here.
Your account visited link.
And then there's the Your Account link that I utilized earlier.
So you can see from that how vastly different that experience was, that everything is laid out in a really sensible order. Things like the menus are highlighted in code. So when you highlighted the chevron next to 24/7 help, it very clearly told him that that would trigger opening a menu. This is just done with building the website properly from the first place. There's no widgets on there. There's nothing been retrofitted. It's purely just a positive experience. And you'll see from the full video, if you watch it, just how easy it is for Joe to interact with that, but also how useful it is to have things like the skip to navigation and skip to main content link. Obviously, if you don't do that, you have to tab through every single link before you get to the actual context of the page. And what we want users to do is to get to the message on the page and get through the journey we're trying to take them on, no matter what device they're using. So super important and quite enlightening to see the vast difference between something that is patched to be more accessible and something that's truly accessible from the ground up. So in summary, take responsibility, understand that we all need to be better, and there's more that we can do as clients, as agencies, but making sure that, you know, we're taking responsibility and we're trying to do better. Get educated, so read the resources, have a look at sites like Scope, like the ARIA project, like WCAG. They're all differing levels of techiness, depending on whether you're a developer or a client, but really important to really understand the landscape and things that can be done to make things better. Empathizing with your users, so really understanding who your users are, what challenges they might face, and how we can work with them to be better. Implementing best practices, again, content and code wise, to make sure that everything is done as best it can be. And embrace the journey. So it is a journey. We try our very best to incorporate accessibility into everything. It's an intrinsic part of our process. We can still be better. Everyone can still be better. So embrace the fact that it's an ongoing process. It's something that we need to work on continually. Embrace it. Don't beat yourself up when your site isn't accessible now. Just try step by step to make it a better experience for your users. So can we help? We'd love to. That's what we're here for. So there's a couple of things that we can do. We can start with an accessibility audit. So we have a great tool that we use, which will audit an entire website and highlight absolutely everything that either wrong with it or could be improved on it. Alongside that, we run a more human focused report where we look at the actual user experience. We highlight any best practices that aren't being followed on that. And we give you then back a report, which is the technical report, which shows all of the kind of technical issues of the website. But alongside that would be a written document. So that explains the technical report in human speak, but also gives you a load of next steps that you can make to improve your website. And then in terms of remediation, so, you know, if we didn't build your website, we can still work with you to make it better. So we can work with pretty much any website to implement the kind of code changes and advise that on the content changes to really ensure it's meeting those best practice and is that truly inclusive experience for your users that we all want to have. So useful resources to go and do some bedtime reading is the Scope business website. So this again is something we were actually involved in the beta test for this in terms of advising from an agency point of view, from a usability point of view. It has loads of resources, loads of services that Scope are now offering that can help you. The WCAG, so these actual guidelines, it's pretty techy, but this will give you an idea of things that you can be doing and things that are required. Also gives a good idea of the level, the depth that can be gone to make things truly accessible. And then there's the accessibility project, again, all around user contributed ideas, user contributed stories. It's a real great resource showing real depth of information. So I've seen a few questions come in on chat. If anyone has any more questions, please fire them to me now. But let's just have a look here. So can you share a link to Scope resources? Yes, so we've got the link there in the video. We'll also put that in the follow-up email to you, so you can see that and you can go and have a good read of that. A certain typeface is better to use than others. Yes, absolutely. A lot of the time, and again, this is try not to make assumptions about your users. So there are a lot of people that will say do have a learning disability such as dyslexia. They will already have tools in place where they can automatically change the typeface of a website. There are some typefaces that are particularly good for dyslexic users. There's one that's designed specifically for dyslexic users, but generally keeping a typeface as simple and as clean and as easy to read as possible is really important. But also making sure that font sizes are large enough that it can be viewed without having to zoom in loads, making sure that the contrast of text is clear and understandable, so you haven't got red text on a blue background, for example. We're not just talking about, you know, can it be viewed easily, but we also have to consider things like color blindness, which affects a huge amount of people. There are lots of different types of color blindness. You know, there's red, blue, blue, green. There's all sorts of different varying levels of color blindness. It's really important that those are considered as well, and we're not putting anything on the site that could be jarring or could be difficult to read. So we've got one here for collaborating with the users. How do tools like Hotjar interact with users in an accessible way? It's a great tool for feedback capture and temp checking. Yes, we love Hotjar. So that does give you at its core the ability to record sessions anonymously. It does a great job of obfuscating any form input, so users' privacy is respected, but it also gives that great insight into how people are actually using the website, how people are flowing through it. But it also has tools like exit surveys, like questionnaires that you can add on there. To be completely honest, we haven't tested Hotjar with screen readers to see what impact that has. So it is something that I'm going to go and do after this. So I don't actually know how accessible their widgets are, but it's a really great question and something I will be looking into. So what's best practice for hyperlinks in blogs, hyperlinking part of the sentence rather than inserting and hyperlinking the URL itself? So yeah, again, having the entire link written out in a sentence means that the screen reader will read that link out. So it will say https://www. It's really bad. So it should be linked to the text, but the text should provide its own meaningful description of what it is that you are linking to. Again, please don't ever use click here or read more. What you can have is click here to read our annual report and highlight that entire link with click here to read our annual report. That gives context to the link. It's then really understandable that when you click on it, you're going to be taken to the annual report. So yeah, really, really important that all hyperlinks have really, really good understanding. Descriptive text, don't use here. I'm not sure what that means. I assume that means the kind of click here. Yes, absolutely. Always really, really descriptive with anything on the site. So headings should be descriptive, should give real meaning. Links should be descriptive. Images, alt text should be descriptive. You should always consider the context, and always consider the kind of user's experience of when they're going with that. So no more questions by the look of it. If you think of something after this, don't worry. We are going to be sending out the email with all of the links. Just reply to that with anything that anything you've thought about since, or if you do want to hop on a chat with us, we're more than happy to set up a Zoom call and answer any of your questions, or even run through your own website with you and figure out things that you could do as really quick wins on there. So yeah, thank you so much for joining. It's great when people engage with this and people want to do better. It's certainly something that we should all be doing and can all be striving to improve our sites and our processes. This is obviously an ongoing series of events. Digital Good is all about us giving back and sharing some of our knowledge and expertise. The next event is going to be in September. We're still confirming the actual date of it, but this one's going to be all around using AI in fundraising. So AI tools to improve your donation journey, AI tools to improve your speed of your copywriting, you know, anything that you can do to help improve your processes, make yourselves more current and ultimately get those conversions up. So really hope you'll join us. We'll send out an invitation link to that as soon as we've got the date confirmed and the speakers for that. Hopefully we're going to co-host with a couple of really, really interesting partners that we have in the space. So it should be super useful to you all, I hope. So yeah, really hope to see you there. And thanks very much again for joining, and hope to see you all soon. Thanks.